Hi, I'm Walter Koenig. I performed the role of Chekov in the original series and the 7 Star Trek movies that followed. You are watching Trek Untold.
Hello and welcome back to Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars. I'm your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. It's becoming a rare treat to chat with people who appeared in or worked on the original Star Trek series. And I'm not making that observation just for the sake of being morbid. Let's be real here, it's 2021, and the original Star Trek series will be able to qualify for Social Security benefits in just another 11 years from now. People who grew up with that show have since moved on to have entire lives, and in many cases have become parents or even grandparents. This year marks the 55th anniversary of the franchise, and that's a pretty epic milestone, especially when you consider that this show has continued to give new episodes throughout almost every decade. It's a number that continues to grow and move forward, and as it does, it means that people from that first series will become harder to find and even harder to speak with. So as those numbers continue to increase, that means people who appeared in or worked on that original series will become more and more scarce. That's why today I am beyond happy to tell you that not only is my guest from the original series, but he's a fan favorite who still enjoys playing his character in fan productions to this day, and that would be Mr. Walter Koenig. Walter was Ensign Pavel Chekov in the original series and through all 7 of the original Star Trek films. He continued to play the role in many fan-made films including Renegades, Captain Pike, Starship Excelsior, Of Gods and Men, and others. Sci-fi fans will also recognize Walter as Alfred Bester from Babylon 5, but he's also appeared in dozens of other things, including Ironside, Columbo, Moontrap, and many, many more, as well as some roles in films and shorts coming out later this year. He also has a new book out coming from Jacobs Brown Press titled Beaming Up and Getting Off, Life Before and Beyond Star Trek. This book includes parts from his original memoirs combined with updated stories from when that book left off. Today, Walter is 84 years old, and he continues to have an irresistible and unstoppable urge to act and create. And I'm glad to report he is just as vivacious and sharp as ever. The tough challenge for me when talking with someone like Walter is, what do I ask him? Because really, this is a guy who has said it all about Star Trek again and again, and then 10 times more. I came in with a huge list of questions, and thankfully, Walter had some ideas of his own that he wanted to discuss. So it was an interesting interview that we conducted because it kind of was more of a bouncing off session of ideas and concepts, a little bit more so than just me asking a bunch of questions. It was pretty unique and a rather intimate chat that might not have as much Star Trek talk as you'd like, but we do get to see a side of Walter that doesn't necessarily show up quite as much at the conventions. So I hope you guys enjoy this chat today with Walter Koenig, because as for me, I still can't believe I got to talk with the man. And welcome back to Trek Untold, and now the person who's joining us on the other side of the screen, he needs no introduction, but don't worry, I already gave him one that's about 4 minutes long, so trust me, we went down all of the credits, because there's so many to go through. We are honored today to be joined by Mr. Walter Koenig. Walter, how are you today?
I'm fine. I'm here and I'm ready to reply to whatever question you ask, unless it has to do with the Communist Party and my association.
We deny all associations with the Communist Party. We'll get that out of the way right now.
Okay.
So, Walter, we don't really have a ton of things in common, but we have a few. One of them is that we both grew up in New York City.
Yeah.
We're both incredibly handsome. And the other one is that we are both collectors. And
Yeah.
I know that you're a big collector of a lot of your merchandise, and in particular the Star Trek toys, which I'm also a very big fan of. So I wanted to actually start things off by asking about that. Your first Star Trek figure was in 1993, and that was as part of this classic Bridge Crew set. So I'm curious, what you thought about your very first action figure.
Well, it doesn't look like me. They're all very flattering, the ones that I've seen. I don't collect Star Trek merchandise. I do collect Chekov figures, and my primary source of collecting are comic strip related merchandise that goes back to 1896. So I built a second floor on my house for my collection, which was very extravagant of me and very tolerant of my wife. None of them look like me, and my face in particular, I think, is hard to replicate in three-dimensional toy because there's nothing particularly distinguishing about it. Leonard Nimoy's face, everybody gets part of it right anyway because it's so distinguishable. But regardless of whether it looks like me or not, what's his name? Reeves, the actor.
Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, Keanu Reeves. Yeah, they look more like Keanu Reeves than they do like me.
It's funny because, I also collect a lot of the pre-production toys. So these are things that never got made or before they're manufactured. And I actually have a Chekov pre-production. It's called the test shot. So that's when they are basically testing the molds to make sure they work and they function correctly. And the detail on that is like gorgeous. I wish I could show it to you, but it's so tiny. But it's, as these things get made and as they get manufactured, you just lose all that detail in the paint. It's unfortunate because the one I have, it looks exactly like you from the 60s. It's beautiful.
Well, you have it anyway, and it's in good hands.
So yeah, Jacobs Brown Press, they're the reason why we're chatting today because they just released your updated memoirs towards the end of last year, Beaming Up and Getting Off. Wonderful title, by the way. And it's such a meaty book. There's so much substance in this book. So I wonder, was anything even left on the cutting room floor by the time you were done?
No, they were very good about that. It was originally published in 1997, I think, in 98. And then it was called a Neurotics Guide to the Universe or something like that. And this is a second edition, which includes an additional 20 years of my life. Since that one ended while I was participating in Babylon 5, the fourth season of Babylon 5, this one picks up there and goes forward and backward, covering experiences and feelings and et al. That I omitted for one reason or another from the first volume.
And I learned a lot of things about you from this book, and you have such vivid memories of things that happened so many years ago.
That's where my memory is. My memory is with things that happened at least 30 or 40 years ago. It's much harder recalling things that are more recent. I guess that's a classic first stage of dementia or something. But I'm definitely an example of that kind of personality. Yeah. So actually, the first 200 and some pages were very easy to recall. It was the last 100 pages that I had to labor over.
And you're writing about some really important events in your life. Some of them are happy, some are sad, and I imagine that's got to be just a very taxing thing to do, both mentally and emotional, to have to just relive a lot of those moments. And how did you get through that process?
Well, the most difficult was the passing of my son, and I decided that I would deal with it in 3/4 of a page, and then not confront it again. It's just too painful. So I acknowledge it, and then I go on with the rest of my life.
There's a lot of really great stories. There's a lot of happiness, a lot of tragedy, a lot of sadness, but that's kind of just life itself, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly like life itself. It's just how you approach it, what point of view you take. I tried as best I could not to be self-pitying and not to be angry at people who might have done me an injustice. Just to try to make the book fun.
One of the parts I really enjoyed reading about was your relationship that you had later in life with Mark Lenard. And you guys did The Boys in Autumn, which I knew nothing about, so I went to look it up. I learned more about the play. Unfortunately, I can't find any clips anywhere of it, but it sounds like a really wonderful show that you did together. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about your relationship with him on stage and off stage.
Yeah, well, the first time I met Mark was not at the studio. I met him somewhere else. I don't know where it was. We didn't work together on Star Trek. He was in episodes and scenes that I wasn't involved in. But he knew my love of theater and that I wanted to continue to perform on stage. And he is definitely a stage-bred actor, extremely, extremely good. I got good reviews. He got great reviews. The play that you're referring to is it's about Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn meeting again, like 40 years later. Each has their own secret, and the evolving story is getting to the point where they admit to each other the dark side of their life. And we did it in the small theater in LA to standing room only, literally standing room only audiences, and we had to extend our run. Then we took it on the road, which was particularly courageous, difficult, because there's a Model T Ford that is involved in the play, and you really need to see it on stage unless you're going to cheat the audience completely. So we built one. We built one out of wood. It was beautiful. I had it in my patio for years until it just fell apart. But we were able to wheel it onto the stage unseen. But when we took it on the road in Denver, we did the play to good effect, and resounding applause. But we had a two-dimensional cardboard cutout of the car, which affects the overall sense of authenticity. Nevertheless, we did it there, and we did it in Pennsylvania. We did it in two venues in Pennsylvania. One had a seating capacity of about 300, and the other had a seating capacity of close to 2,000. So that was quite strange. We did it where we did it in the round, where it was dimensional, and we did it when we had a proscenium, depending on the stage structure. We did it at a college in Louisiana, and it was an amazing result. Hundreds of college students, and they just were amazing. They were so good, so appreciative. In any event, so we did it 8 or 9, 10 places on the road, and we had this extended run at the small theater in LA. And then we came back to LA, and we did it in a 400-seat, very professional theater in a city called Thousand Oaks. And then we did it in a couple of other places in Los Angeles. Yeah, we did it quite a bit. We had a great time. We were going to go to Scotland to the big festival they have there every year. I can't think what it's called offhand. You may know it. In any event, Mark lived in two locations. He lived in LA, and he also lived on the East Coast. And in between our performances and the rest of his life, he went back to LA, to New York, and didn't return. And I kept hearing that he had pneumonia. He had one illness or another, but not very clear about precisely what was the problem. I guess it was his choice not to make it public. And it turned out that he had cancer, and that he did not survive the cancer, and we canceled the performance in Scotland. I lost an extraordinarily gifted actor and a good friend whose relationship with me was a bit volatile, but I always considered him a good friend, and I very much respected his work.
He did a lot of beautiful work over the years, just had such an amazing career on TV and film, and of course on stage as well. So, it sounds like just a really wonderful time, though. You got to spend that type of quality time with him and performing with him, too.
Yeah, we did 3 plays together. I mean, Boys in Autumn was just the last one. We did one at the Actors Studio in Los Angeles. Can't remember the name of it, but it was just the two of us. And we did another play that called Upstairs, Downstairs. I think that's what it was called. Maybe not. No, that was a television series. But it was an English comedy, and my wife played the third part in that. We did that in Los Angeles. So yeah, we worked together a significant amount of time.
Now, of course, we have to jump into some Star Trek talk here because I know it's what my listeners want to hear about, and I know you've at this point you've said it so many times. So I've been trying to think, what I could dare to ask you about that would be something different and unique, and we'll see what we can find as we go along here. But I just rewatched yesterday an episode called "Spectre of a Gun," and in particular, I want to ask you about that one because you got to spend a lot of time smooching Bonnie Beecher in that one. That must have been a good time to film.
Yeah, the sidebar to that story is that I knew her boyfriend in New York years before I met her. And if you read my book, you'll find out that we pulled off a caper together, for which we did not go to jail. We probably should have. I'm not going to go any further into that. I think the something has expired, and
The statute of limitations.
statute of limitations. Yes, so they can't put us in jail anymore. But it's an interesting story. So I knew him. It's a crazy world. I knew him long before I met Bonnie, and she brought it up that her boyfriend says hello, and he didn't come visit the set just as well. We did a lot of smooching. No, we just did smooching for the scene, but it was fun. I loved performing Inspector the Gun. I got the girl. I got killed. I went down to the planet. I was involved in the action. It was a good episode, and actually, it was supposed to be a forerunner of the kind of involvement I would have in the third year. The intention was to make Chekov more a part of the away team, the team that went on the adventures on the various planets. So that was written in the second year, but we formed in the third year, and was supposed to represent, as I say, Chekov's involvement in the series at that point, because the mail had been very good. I had gotten a lot of mail from little kids, and but then we discovered during that summer between that spring between the second and third season, that the third season was going to be our last season. When that happened, all the plans to make Chekov more involved in the story sort of went by the side. And he went back to II, kept in most of his witty repartee.
I mean, that's something that's talked about a lot in the book, is your desire to have Chekov be a much more fully fleshed character. Because, like you said, I mean, for the most part, he's just going, aye, Captain, fire torpedoes. And you wanted to make him into a more fully fleshed out character.
As I'm sure most actors who do not play leads, we all want to do more work. We all want to be more involved. I certainly enjoyed being in Star Trek, and I enjoyed my participation as Chekov. But I've got an ego. I don't think of myself as a supporting player, as a bit player. I don't think of myself in those terms. Although, if you look at the work I did on Star Trek, you might catalog me in that particular that kind of participation on the show.
I mean, I would never say that you had an ego. I mean, really looking through the book, a big part of this story is you trying to find a way to get yourself more out there, because you had all this time being frustrated as the part of Chekov. You wanted to become so much more. And I'm curious, was that like part of the frustration over the years with the direction of the character and how it was used? I mean, is that what kind of spilled into some of your choices later on in life too, for the other Star Trek movies or just other roles in general?
Well, first of all, when it came to Star Trek, I was the new kid on the block. I came out in the second season, and I never felt totally a member of the cast. Some of that had to do with the way the supporting actors were treated. We weren't treated badly. Nobody yelled at us, but there was a hierarchy of participation, and Bill, Leonard, and DeForest got the most to do, and as they were the stars, that was certainly the way things worked in those days. I think now, in the last 10, 20 years, if you're a regular on the show, there is more recognition given to your involvement, and you feel more like members of the family. Everybody was okay, you know, nobody was difficult to work with. Well, not much anyway. Got along great with DeForest and Leonard, and with George Nichelle, DeForest. I said that, George. Leonard. No, yeah, that pretty much covers all the people I got along well with.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the big things you cover in the book is your relationship with William Shatner, and I didn't plan on asking so quickly on here. I know, right? Surprise. I just want to let you know too. On this show we talked to a lot of other actors who appeared in the original series, a lot of character actors, a lot of the guest actors, and many of them who worked with Shatner had mixed reactions. And one of the things that you talk about in the book a few times was about basically how a scene would call for a two-shot, but somehow it ended up becoming a one-shot with Shatner.
Yeah.
And so many of the guests we spoke to had that exact same problem where they'd say, "Oh, just turn your head this way," and suddenly the weight of the camera is all on Shatner.
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm 84 now, and I'm trying to put all those feelings behind. I'm just trying to live out whatever's left, and with some sense of tranquility. I don't succeed all the time. When I'm asked at conventions something very specific about Bill, I tend to be candid about the relationship. But I really don't want to dwell on it anymore. I mean, he's almost 90, for God's sakes, and as robust as he is, he's not here to debate me and to argue his feelings. So I feel it's not fair, really, to only discuss my side of things. So at this late stage in my life, I'm trying to take a more benign attitude towards everything.
I imagine over the years at conventions, this is probably like the thing that everybody always wants to ask you. So I'm curious, is there a question that you've always wanted someone at a convention to ask you that no one ever has?
No, there are some questions that I'm glad people didn't ask. But the fans are terrific. They've always been terrific. I bristle when I hear about the bizarre behavior of fans and how they're geeks and Trekkies and all these things that are said in a negative way. Fans are very bright. They're very conscious, politically conscious. Most of them are very progressive, I think, and philosophically. We do have I think there is a change in fandom, and that has much to do with the expansion to motion pictures. Because in order to do motion pictures and to make money in a venue that is far more expensive to operate in, you need to appeal to a wider base. Because the wider base are made of people who want the action adventure, who want the pyrotechnics, who want to be entertained viscerally as opposed to socially or intellectually. And so your stories get flattened a little bit. They're still fun. There's still important things to say. I think we spoke very poignantly about the extinction of races, breeds, of species, in our story about the whales. Star Trek VI was very socio-political. But your audience becomes more involved in the spectacular. And as a consequence, something is sacrificed. And generally, it's the topical issues that we were able to engage in when we did the series to, I think, a greater degree. And as another consequence, our audience was more tuned in philosophically, and they were looking for stories that had to do with issues that were important to all of us. And I always maintain and believe that despite, or in addition, or beyond the storytelling on Star Trek, is that opening shot of 7 people on the bridge who are diverse in belief, in ethnicity, in race. And those people really get along together. They have each other's backs. And I think that's the most important comment Gene Roddenberry made, and he intended to make, having an African-American and a Japanese-American, someone from a totally different species, someone who's determined to be the leader, a Russian-American. So we had that, and that was there every episode. And that was the message that we were hitting on, even when we didn't, articulate it verbally. That visual was very, very important. And it said there will be a time when all races, creeds, ethnicities, cultures, nationalities can get along together, can not only get along, but care for each other. And where humanity and other species, if it comes to that, can all claim the right to this world and be proud of their contribution to it and be respected for it. So that's what Star Trek said in just that diversity. And also in many of the stories.
You know, what's interesting about it is a lot of those topics that you covered back in the original series are still relevant today. And the way I've always kind of seen it is that, the issues are still the same. They've just become more complicated here in 2021. Right. And, that's what's kind of, I feel like, caused a split among the fandom, because you've got one side that is more progressive leaning, one side that's more conservative leaning, and they kind of want their stories a certain way. So, I'm glad to see that you're conscious of this kind of change in the fandom.
Yeah. So I'm not sure that the latest generation of fans are as I don't know. I'm guessing here. They're maybe not as emotionally affected or involved with our cast. I can't speak for the other casts of Star Trek, all of who had very, very strong followings. But I think entertainment supersedes everything on the large screen, and there's perhaps less thinking involved and more just reacting emotionally and enjoying the pleasure of the high technology.
Trek Untold will return momentarily. Trek Untold is brought to you by Triple Fiction Productions. If you're a Star Trek cosplayer looking for props, or toy collector looking to spice up your shelves, Triple Fiction Productions has you covered. Triple Fiction Productions produces affordable and unique 3D printed Trek-inspired products from the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and the movies. You can expect the same amount of care and attention to detail in any of the items in their catalog, whether it's a prop replica for use in a fan film, or a part of a cosplay, or accessories and playsets for figures from Playmates, Migos, or Diamond Select. Own your very own tricorder or phaser rifle with working lights, the bridge of the Enterprise E for your Playmates figures, or any other item from countless species and ships from the Star Trek universe. All products are 3D printed in the USA and are constantly evolving and improving based on fan feedback. To learn more about their products, visit them at triple-fictionproductions.net or on Facebook at facebook.com/triplefictionproductions. Triple Fiction Productions, taking Star Trek where no 3D printer has gone before.
Hi, I'm Armin Shimmerman.
And I'm Kitty Swink. 17 years ago, I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. I didn't know it at the time, but I had a 4% chance of surviving 5 years.
As her husband, I was very scared.
But he never let me see that. You are a rock.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pancreatic cancer is the third leading cause of cancer-related deaths in the United States, with a 5-year survival rate of just 10%.
We want it to be much higher.
Much higher. It's 6% better when I was diagnosed, but not high enough. More than 60,000 Americans are estimated to be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2021, and more than 48,000 will die from the disease. Because symptoms are often vague, it can be hard to detect.
Like the rest of the world, the Star Trek universe has been struck repeatedly by pancreatic cancer. Not only those of us that work on the show, but our fans around the world as well. It is why we came together with so many others to work with the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, the leading patient advocates committed to fighting the world's toughest cancer.
PanCan is working hard to create better outcomes for this devastating disease through its groundbreaking research in early detection and better treatment options.
PanCan drives progress by funding life-saving research, providing personalized patient services, and creating a community of supporters and volunteers who will stop at nothing to create a world in which all pancreatic cancer patients will thrive.
You can help support their important mission by donating at pancan.org today. We donated. Won't you do so too?
Please, make it so.
We now return to Trek Untold.
So I wanted to ask you, Walter, about something that, again, I'm sure you've spoken about this in depth, but I want to hear it just straight from your mouth today, too, and that's about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. And you do mention this, of course, in the book as well, so I urge folks to pick up the book and read it for themselves. But the story I'm getting at is that scene you have with Ricardo Montalban, where he recognizes Chekov somehow. And you talk all about that, so I'd just love to hear your take. If you could kind of tell us that story about Star Trek II and the Khan-Chekov relationship that shouldn't be.
Well, first of all, Ricardo was a wonderful guy to work with. I mean, he'd been a movie star. He was a leading man. He had a huge history of work. One story that is perhaps a little bit beside the point, but not entirely. This was Nick Meyer's first directing job with us, and he came to it very professionally. And it just assumed that as director, he was ultimately in charge, the way any director should feel, but certainly television directors never feel that way, because there's always the leading characters who have the final say in the portrayal of the characters they are playing. Because the directors are there for a week, the leading actors are there forever. Well, it actually extends this to supporting actors too. Never got a note, I think, from any of the directors who came on the TV series. So we're starting to rehearse The Wrath of Khan, and Nick Meyer watched us for a little bit, and then asked us to retire to his dressing room for a table talk about what we're doing. Innocent as to the hierarchy of things. And we're all sitting there, and he says, Ricardo, now in this scene, it's a little over the top. And I went to myself, oh my God, here it comes. He's going to get crushed. He's going to be crucified by Ricardo Montalban. And I looked at Montalban to Ricardo, and he goes, I see what you mean. Holy cow, I never expected that. Not on our set, not on our set. You get the point. He was delightful. He had no ego. I mean, he was bigger than life, but it called for it. And what was wonderful was his casting was so strong. He was such a prominent, dominating figure that he was a great match for our antagonist. What you want in any screenplay, in any story, is that the antagonist is a match for the protagonist. Otherwise, you know who's going to win in the end, and you don't want to know entirely who's going to win. Or if you know that Captain Kirk is ultimately going to be successful, you want to know that he was in a fight. And Ricardo presented that. He was such a powerful presence on the screen. So it made the whole story, it gave it friction and this immovable object, an unstoppable force kind of thing, which is very important for storytelling. And at the same time, he wasn't a monster. He didn't have 6 tentacles. He was a human being. He was a human being who had a sense of vengeance and revenge. And we have all known that in some small way, unless we've been born to be a priest or something, or a religious figure. In any case, so I thought the casting was brilliant. I thought his portrayal was great. I thought the way they used him in the story was great. And then, the whole thing with Kirk's ex-wife, lover, and their son, all of that was really, really very engaging and made watching the film a great event. And of course, Chekov did have a few things to say. Now, regarding, and I remember, which is really amazing, regarding why it played out the way it did with Khan saying, "Oh yes, I remember you. I remember." He didn't remember me because I wasn't in this series when he made his first appearance. But of course, he would not have remembered that in any case. He was an actor reciting words, committing them to memory, and trusting that he had met before. I knew it from the get-go. I knew it before the script was shown to any of the cast. In any case, I was given the script to read before most of the actors. I had a friend on the inside who got this, and he gave it to me to read. So I read this early version of the script. Spock dies in the second act. That's preposterous. You can't take one of the icons of the show and kill him off, as if it was just another supporting character. And I called up Harv Bennett and I told him, you can't do it. He thought I was calling about lobbying for more to do with my character. That may have been in the back of my mind, but I never brought it up. And NBC said, I don't talk to actors. And I said, I'm not calling you as an actor. I'm calling you as somebody who has examined the story structure, and you can't kill Spock in the second act. And I said, but I'm sure you've already been told that. He said, no. And I was blown away. I couldn't believe that anybody would do that. So he was impressed enough to ask me to do a Trekkie run on the entire story. See, I'm getting to it. And I read it, and there were some little nagging things that were inconsistent. Some dialogue that was inconsistent with the way we would say things. But at the same time, I recognized the fact that Spock had never met Chekov. So I had the opportunity to be a Boy Scout and a total moron and tell him that, or just ignore it, So I ignored it. I did mention dialogue that would not be said. I did mention small things, but I ignored the fact that was inconsistent with what we had already established. And nobody else mentioned it. So we went ahead and shot it that way, which was great because it gave me more to do. I knew there would be some backlash, but I made it into kind of a joke when people would ask me, and they would ask me, everybody, at every convention, there would be somebody who would jump up so proud of knowing this detail was incorrect, that Chekov did not meet Khan before, that I decided to make a joke out of it. And I did. I said Chekov was on the Enterprise during the series. He was just working on the third deck behind the boiler room, and was suddenly taken with and needed to attend the bathroom facilities, and was so sick that he was there for a long time. And when the door, and Khan in the meantime was indeed in distress, in urinary distress, and was pounding on the door until finally pounding on the door. Finally, I let him in, and And he said, I will never forget. So I just incorporated that dialogue from the movie into my story. And I got a laugh, and everybody sort of let it go, you know.
Well, I can definitely appreciate that. I'd probably be doing the same thing in the bathroom the entire time. So, yeah. So, one of my guilty pleasures in the Star Trek fandom is I'm a big fan of the animated series. And reading the book, I found out why Chekov didn't show up in the cartoon. And, I knew that you had written that episode, The Infinite Vulcan, and I loved hearing you talk a little bit about that and the impetus to do writing for that episode. But in particular, I'd love to hear a little bit about you working with Dorothy Fontana and what she kind of taught you for your writing that you continue to use today with what you write.
Well, Dorothy was great. When I first met her, I thought she was very distant and very standoffish. That's the thing that we sometimes confuse shyness with what's the word? Not standoff. There's a better word than standoffish, but I can't think of it. And I made that mistake. I thought she was just very much emotionally distant, and I didn't realize that she was actually rather shy. And once I got to know her better, we became friends. And we were great friends, but we became friends. And she respected me and my work, which is always a good start. And I certainly respected her. In fact, when I did that a semi-professional episode about Chekov growing old, I recommended that she write it. I told these folks that she should write it, and she did, and it was fun, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And she I think had a pretty good time. And she was which I didn't know at the time, evidently my biggest supporter on The Infinite Vulcan. I read about another book about animation, about Star Trek animation, and lo and behold, there she is talking about the Infinite Vulcan as being one of her favorite episodes, which I was totally amazed by. You can look it up. It's true. I swear it is. In any case, it's very sad. Her passing was very sad because she was a good person, a delightful human being. She had her head in the right place. She had a very loving husband. And she can continue to work all through the years, which I certainly rejoiced in that.
And on the topic of writers also, another one who I always love hearing stories about is Harlan Ellison.
How did I know?
You mouthed it somehow. You immediately knew. That's amazing. You're psychic.
Yeah. I met Harlan, and I had no idea that times had changed so much that he's no longer a household word. I didn't know that. In fact, I introduced him at a party for George and Brad after their wedding. And I said, and Harlan Ellison, and he got a not the most enthusiastic response, not a negative one, but there were obviously people who didn't know who he was. And he rebuked me gently, the only time gently that he probably rebuked me, for not taking the time to give some of his history. And I said, well, everybody knows who you are, Harlan. Everybody does. Because back in the 60s and the 70s, he was a star. He was invited to all the conventions, and he was extraordinarily witty and wry and articulate. And I didn't know that times had changed at all, and that he had fallen under the curse of changing times and anonymity, which accompanies such things. Although we all experience it, I told jokes 30 years ago that reflected where we were and got big laughs, and then I told those same jokes 15 years ago and got dead silence. And I realized, can't talk about the movie Deep Throat. Nobody knows what I'm talking about, et cetera, et cetera. So, claymation. I told a story which was true about I had told George. George had been. We were trying to determine or the studio was trying to think what Star Trek 6 was going to be about. And there was a lot of heated discussion about it. And George was out of town when the decision, well, it actually hadn't been made, but he came back and he called me and said, well, what's happened? What's going to be Star Trek 6? And I said, they're going to do it in claymation. Now, when I told that story 20 years ago, I got a big laugh. I told that story 10 years ago. Nobody knew what the hell claymation was. So I learned that can't do that anymore, And the times they are changing. And there was Next Generation, and there was Voyager, and there's all these other shows which were more appropriate to discuss because the fans were fresher. The shows were fresher. The fans knew them better. I've learned over time that my audience that recognizes me on the street has got to be 50 years old. They can't be 40 and 30 anymore, because Star Trek is not that omniscient. I'm not omnipresent as it was in my day.
Well, I can tell you, Walter, if I saw you in the street, I would run over to you and be like, please sign anything. I would just rip off my shirt and just say, sign my chest or something.
Are you sure?
I think so.
Okay.
Well, now you've given away the secrets. Now I definitely know.
No, I've surrendered to the times, and when I make appearances now, I don't wear it. I don't wear a hat anymore. Lo and behold, my God, he's bald.
I'm also glad you brought up that Star Trek 6 story. I love that in the book too. That's like one of the most hilarious things. I know what claymation is. I'd love to have seen Star Trek 6 in claymation. But one of the things that's in your book is actually your I think it was your step outline for Star Trek 6. And I'm not going to talk about that because I want people to read the book and read that part of it. But I do want to talk about a letter that you sent to the producer, Ralph Winters, about an idea for how you wanted the film to end. And I thought this was brilliant. I never heard it before. And your original concept was that you believed that Kirk should actually have died at the end of Star Trek 6. I'd love to hear that.
That wasn't wishful thinking. That was just it was storytelling.
Yeah.
And I really thought that, just as I thought that the series was the end of everything, goodbye. Here's your hat. What are you going to do for the rest of your life? I certainly thought that way after Star Trek 1. I mean, I had to be woken a couple of times during that film. Star Trek 2, I thought was great, and definitely cried out for it. Star Trek 3. Star Trek 3, I thought was okay. It's the B-side of a 45, RPM record. Star Trek 4 was sensational. I loved it. I thought everybody was wonderful, and I had a good part. So I knew there had to be a 5. 5, I thought, was just another movie, without an ending. In fact, I think there's a thesis to be written about the commonality of failure between Star Trek 1 and Star Trek 5. I think you could write a really interesting story about what the similarities were in their failure. Not the least of which was the failure of the special effects, and how that was instrumental in hurting the story. So, and then, okay, so there was 5, but I knew that that there was 2 sides. That our new producer, Harv Bennett, who had been with us since 2, definitely wanted to get rid of us. They wanted the new story, a Star Trek Academy story. But there were forces behind the scenes who felt that there had to be one more Star Trek with the original cast. So I felt fairly confident. No, I didn't feel confident. I never feel confident. I didn't know whether we were going to do Star Trek 6 or not. And there we did, and it was a good movie. I wasn't very happy, and I let that be known. I had fight. It's terribly juvenile on my part. But I had arguments with Leonard Nimoy, of all people, and Jimmy Doohan, and Nichelle, and Harv Bennett, because I thought Star Trek is the end. We're not going to do anymore. We're never going to be seen again. You got to give these supporting actors a moment. You got to give them the time to expand, to develop, to become human beings, to be not simply story people who are processing the story, but who they are. What makes them tick. We never had that. We never had the pronoun I. I think, I believe. It was Captain. Out there, there's something that you should reflect upon, ponder, and make a very important decision. I mean, that's what it became, and was always. And people say, well, you were supposed to be a supporting character. I know, but when you're with something that long, 1967 to I think the mid 80s or something, we were involved in Star Trek. You gotta make those characters human, to make them totally dimensional at some point, for at least 1 minute. And so I was an unhappy camper during Star Trek VI. I knew it was a good film. I wasn't able to appreciate it as much as I might have. Who knew that wasn't the end of Star Trek? Well, it wasn't for me, the end of Star Trek. And so people say, well, you must have been desperate to go ahead and do these semi-professional Star Trek stories. No, I was still trying to get this character to make him live, to make him somebody who you knew what he was thinking and what he cared about. Not simply an expository character who was there to help articulate the plot, but not to tell you what he thought about the plot. Anyway, that's my soapbox.
I'm glad you also mentioned that too, because that's, again, kind of the big topic in the book, is trying to get respect, not just for Chekov, but for Walter Koenig, and for what Walter Koenig does and what he can do. And so, and that's why I asked about actually Boys of Autumn, because, that's like where you took the opportunity onto yourself to make things happen. So, I think that's a pretty important thing. That's a pretty big part of what your life has been, is just making sure that you get the respect that you deserve.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I've overdone it on a couple of occasions. I don't think I overdid it on Star Trek, because I wasn't one of the people who went running to Roddenberry's office after shooting and say, you got to do this with my character. I found out from reading everybody else's books that they did that. I didn't. I just stewed in my own juices and kept it pretty much to myself. But and this is way beside the point, and I'm amazed that I had the gonads to do this. But the second year at Neighborhood Playhouse, the drama school I attended, was the time to let the world know about what talent you do or do not have. Because second year we opened up our production to the public, and we had showcase productions where casting directors and directors were allowed to come watch us. And we were doing The Crucible, which is a brilliant play by Arthur Miller. And they posted the cast on the front door. And I saw that I had a very small part. And, there are a lot of small parts and only a very few large parts. And there wasn't really a reason why I should take umbrage. I mean, I'm a student, for God's sakes, and I'm not a leading man, and I can't make those kind of decisions. But I hung out outside, hovered rather than hung out, hovered outside the door until the director, who was also the artistic head of the school, came. And then I yelled at him and told him that I deserved a better part than that. I don't know where the hell I got that. It came out of fear. That if I didn't have a big part, nobody would ever cast me, and none of the public who were involved in the profession would ever cast me in anything good. I mean, that was my paranoia and lack of ego, or weak ego. In any case, he was furious with me. He's furious with me, and took an opportunity during because I ended up playing the small part opposite Jessica Walters. She was my wife. But there was a moment when there was a lapse because I thought we were taking a break, and I was downstairs answering a phone, and came back up to find him screaming at me about what a prima donna I was, and how I was trying to undermine the production in the very beginning, which is not true, because once I knew I wasn't going to play the lead, I wanted to do the best job I could. There's no point in biting my nose to spite my face, and I had pride, and I was a professional. But he just lit into me, but I guess I carried that with me. I mean, there were times when I totally acknowledged and understood that I was not going to be the focus of attention, and I accepted that. In other stage work, certainly on the screen, I did several very small roles. I played one scene role in Untouchables, another one in Combat. I got it. I knew what was going on. I was new. I was relatively young. So I'm making way too much out of this. But ultimately Star Trek VI bothered me so much because each of us, and I was really thinking about Scotty and Uhura and Sulu, that each of us really deserved a very specific, very caring moment by the writing team. Didn't get it. So I was unhappy.
Yeah, I mean, again, it kind of goes back to that major theme I'm looking at here when I read the book, and that's you didn't want to be just pigeonholed as Chekov for your entire life. You wanted to be Walter Koenig, the actor. Yeah. And, I mean, that's something that you continue to struggle with this day. And, I actually want to bring up a role you just recently had, and that was in the short film, Who is Martin Danzig? And I thought that was a really beautiful film. I'd love to hear a little bit about that film, because it's on Amazon Prime for anybody who wants to check it out. I think it's excellent work, and it really shows the kind of chops that you didn't have a chance to show in Star Trek.
That's, since the end of Star Trek, that's what I really have been looking for. Yeah, this gentleman, he tried to get Michael Caine, and he tried to get the American actor who was in Godfather, who played the Senor.
Robert Duvall, yeah, Robert Duvall.
Yeah, they tried to get those two. I don't feel it an insult to lose to either of those guys, but they had both given it up. They had both retired. So I was his third choice. Then, in this case, being third is pretty good, like say, because it was he didn't have to pay me as much, but on the other hand, I got to do a role that was kind of fun. And I was there a couple of days, and he just knew me by my work, got a hold of me through my agent, and I went there, and the two people that I worked with, a little girl and the other gentleman, were both great. We were both fun to work with. It was a very nice, pleasant, entertaining couple of days. So that, I'm surprised anybody would bring that up in a conversation, but I definitely enjoyed that. And there were other experiences like that were modest, they had modest objectives as films, but that were enjoyable doing. So in fact, I've been asked on a couple of occasions, how desperate were you to be Chekov to go ahead and do those independent projects that were, most of them were, one was a $500,000 production. One was my screenplay that I wrote that had nothing to do with Star Trek, called Inalienable, which should have had a better fate, I think.
And that was the one with Marina Sirtis, right?
Yeah, Marina was terrific.
Yeah.
She was wonderful. I was so pleased that she was willing to participate. And there was actually a lot of people from Star Trek involved in Inalienable, the supporting actors. My wife had an important part. My son had an important part. It was a lot of fun. The woman who played the lead is now my agent. But it never got released. It never got released because of insurance problems. There was supposed to be an insurance payment made that was never made, and the picture was therefore not considered available to the public. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, the things that I did after Star Trek, with no exceptions, had one thing going for them. I got to work, not just to be there. I got to work. Even Martin Danzig, I was a short 12-minute film, but I got to perform. I got to do what I was supposed to do. Someone recently said to me, "You definitely were born to be what you are, to be an actor," and got that from my reading my autobiography, I think, not from watching my talent on screen. So yeah, so when I look back, I'm really on the deep end of my life now. I have no idea how much time I have left. I have nothing pressing at the moment to bid me adieu. But 84, that's pretty old. So I look back, and for the most part, I think I got a pretty good shot. I had a pretty good time. Yeah, disappointments, disillusionments, anger, all those things were present. You know, all those things I experienced. But if this is it, and I don't see anything in the future, but then remember, I didn't see anything beyond the third season of Star Trek either. You know, the TV series. But if this is it, I'll go kicking and fighting, but I'll still feel that it's been a worthwhile adventure.
Yeah, this comes up a bunch of times on this podcast. I did a documentary about my uncle a few years ago, who was an artist in New York. He passed away a few years ago, and he lived in, for the most part, kind of obscurity as the artist. And it wasn't until after he passed away that suddenly his popularity really started to pick up. And for him, a lot of his quest had been to just be taken seriously, to be recognized for what he did. And it sounds like this is kind of what you're going through, and what you've kind of, the realization you've come to at this point in your life is, that feeling of recognition, and I guess more than just recognition, that feeling that people see what you've accomplished.
Well, now I'm going to contradict myself in the process of contradicting you. I feel that the audience that watched me work are far disproportionately enthusiastic than I deserve. That's because they loved Star Trek, and I was part of it, regardless if I was just holding on to its coattails. So I think I'm past the part where I get a little embarrassed. But there was a time when I'd step on the stage at a convention or some public event and be a little embarrassed because the enthusiasm was so strong, way more than what I contributed to this show. So in that sense, I feel that I have been disproportionately well received. What bothers me is that I think I could have done better if I had been given the opportunity. So maybe I'm being a little greedy, but I don't want to be applauded for aye, Captain. That's kind of embarrassing. So when I did have, like Star Trek 4, a couple of moments in Star Trek 2, that, I had a chance to show some talent. I embraced that more than I embraced the general avalanche of enthusiasm that comes with just being part of that entity.
So, Walter, if you could travel back in time and see yourself back in the 60s, what advice would you tell yourself? Or what do you know today that you wish you could tell younger Walter?
See, the problem with that question is the assumption that I would do it differently. But I know who I am. I know what my personality is. I know my ego defects. The things that I remember in greater detail are the disappointments rather than the minor triumphs. And so the thing is that I would probably do everything the same way, unless you were to reconstruct me, started at zero base and make Walter Koenig somebody other than who I am. I've been lucky. I've had a good run. I've had good times. I've been appreciated on several occasions. I don't think any of that would have made a difference to Walter Koenig in the 1960s. If I was to go back and say, look, there will be good things that happen. There will be a sense that you have not lived this life in vain. You don't have to stress so much. You don't have to feel this sense of inadequacy. I could tell myself that, and I would still do the things the same way. I know that now, so there's no purpose to wonder if I could have advised myself to be a healthier person, a more emotionally stable person than I am.
That's a great answer. Very introspective answer. So, Walter, as we wrap up this interview here, we've talked a lot about some very introspective things about yourself, and I want to thank you again for all of your honesty and openness to talk about these topics. Looking back on your career, on your life, what do you want your ultimate legacy to be? How do you want Walter Koenig to be seen?
Well, it's kind of wish fulfillment because I didn't necessarily pursue life's course in those terms, but I would like people to ignore the neurotic side that I have manifested from time to time, and think of me most lovingly as a respected professional who performed up to his abilities when the challenge was presented, and that I like people. I appreciate their support. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be involved in a phenomenon that I respect. And if I have to be remembered for one particular entity, it would be Star Trek, because Star Trek spoke to us about a better world and supported the philosophy where we all were able to get along together.
Well, any true fan out there who loves Star Trek also knows to go beyond Star Trek, and I want to thank you for all of your work that you did, of course, on that series, but as well just everything you've done beyond the Enterprise, and acknowledge you for your contributions to entertainment. I wish I could have seen you and Mark perform. That would have been amazing, I know. Yeah. So, again, thank you so much for everything that you have achieved in your career, and I know there's still more ahead, right?
Who knows? Who knows? Right now, I'm recovering from 2 spinal surgeries, and I'm walking without a limp. So that's improvement after a year and a half. So yeah, I'm still around.
That's good. That's good to hear. I hope I get to meet you one day at a convention. And yeah, again, thank you so much for chatting. I mean, this is like one of those surreal moments in my time doing this podcast where I get to talk to Walter Koenig. This is going to be one of those times I don't ever forget. So, thank you for your generosity today. Just being able to chat with you is mind-blowing. I don't know how I'm just rambling right now because I'm just so mind-blown. So, again, thank you so much for all of this. And again, folks, the book is Beaming Up and Getting Off. It's by Jacobs Brown Press, so we're going to have links to that in the show notes. So do make sure you pick up a copy of that, because there's obviously so much more we didn't discuss, and I want you to read it to get the whole picture, get the entire story of who Walter Koenig is, and all the really amazing things he's gone through and that he's accomplished. So, Walter, again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. Be healthy, be well, and be safe. And of course, live long and prosper. And that was our chat with Walter Koenig, and I will never have words to express just how grateful I was to have this uninterrupted time to chat with him. He's an artist who in some ways never got his full chance to shine due to being a part of the Star Trek universe. But I admire the fact that at this point in his life he isn't bitter about it and has discovered new avenues to express himself, and ultimately learned to love himself for what he has accomplished. That's a pretty powerful lesson in there too, and I hope you walked away with some ideas like that for yourself. Just a reminder once more, check out Walter's memoirs from Jacobs Brown Press, Beaming Up and Getting Off, Life Before and Beyond Star Trek. We'll have links for that in the show notes for this week's episode. Now, we didn't chat a ton about Star Trek TV episodes today, but since we did mention Spectre of a Gun, I'd like to spend a little bit more time chatting about that one. This is one of 3 Star Trek episodes that took place in a Western-style action movie setting. TNG would do it next in the Season 6 episode, A Fistful of Datas, and Enterprise would follow it some years later with the episode North Star. If you might recall, this episode had a pretty unique-looking set, and that's because it was originally intended to be filmed on location in an outdoor Western town. However, due to budget issues, they were unable to make that happen, and instead went with this surreal approach that I think makes it more interesting and very much more a Star Trek kind of thing. The working title for the episode was The Last Gunfight, and while the title changed, the episode did in fact air one day before the 87th anniversary of the actual gunfight at the OK Corral. How's that for timing? So that wraps up this week's episode of Trek Untold. Thank you so much for checking it out this week. Please make sure that you're following us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Trek Untold. That's one word, no spaces, at Trek Untold. It's the best way to get updates on guests, check out all the memes and other things that we're posting, and interact with myself and other Star Trek fans. If you'd like to support this podcast, go ahead and check out patreon.com/TrekUntold and become a subscriber to the show. Or check out teespring.com/stores/TrekUntold to check out some of our merchandise. If you've been enjoying Trek Untold, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to podcasts. And if you're on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel, youtube.com/nerdnewstoday. Leaving ratings, reviews, and comments are things that all help this podcast grow, and they'll cost you nothing but a few seconds of your time. Doing things like that, or even telling your friends or other Star Trek fans about the stuff you've heard on the show and making sure they know about us, are huge helps to keeping Trek Untold growing. Thank you once again to our sponsor, Triple Fiction Productions. Go ahead and check them out at triple-fictionproductions.net. If you'd like to send us some feedback about this episode, suggest a guest, or ask to be booked on the show, go ahead and send me an email at trekuntold@gmail.com. And of course, thanks to listeners like you for choosing Trek Untold and making it your weekly Star Trek podcast. This has been Trek Untold. I'm Matthew Kaplowitz, and until next time, fortune favors the bold.
Trek Untold is sponsored by TrekSphere.com, promoting fan-produced Star Trek content in all forms, is powered by the RageWorks podcasting network, and is affiliated with Nerd News Today.